Well, US President Donald Trump is facing calls to be impeached after he drew criticism with fiery message on Iran. Trump continued his polarizing rhetoric on Easter Sunday, delivering an expletive-laden attack on Iran that sparked criticism on Capitol Hill and beyond. Trump renewed his threat to unleash heavy bombing on Iranian power plants and bridges if Tehran refused to unblock the Strait of Hormuz. Praise be to Allah, he added, after ending another threatening message a day earlier with glory be to God. The post has raised eyebrows, especially on a Christian holiday. Democratic Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer wished Americans on Easter as he lambasted Trump, saying that President of the United States is ranting like an unhinged madman on social media. Schumer added that Trump was threatening possible war crimes and alienating allies, and that the country deserved so much better.
Hey people, John here. So what just happened? Over 200 members of Congress have formally gone on record, with their signatures and reputations attached, calling for Trump's removal through either impeachment or the 25th Amendment. The charges aren't vague: defying court orders, unauthorized military action, abuse of power, and systematic destruction of judicial independence.
Democrat leader Bernie Sanders, he also echoed similar tone, pointing out Trump's remarks as ravings of a dangerous and mentally unbalanced individual. Sanders also called upon Congress to act so the war could end, and likewise, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy, who opposes the war in Iran, wrote that if he were in Trump's cabinet, he would spend Easter calling constitutional lawyers about the 25th Amendment. Referring to the clause that provides for a transfer of power if the president is unable to serve. While Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, also a Democrat, he noted that it was not the first time that the 79-year-old Trump had used stark language. Kaine said that explicit threats to bomb Iran into Stone Age are embarrassing and juvenile, suggesting that there was a clear absence of plan and rationale within the Trump administration. The criticism, however, was not limited to Trump's Democratic opponents. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the former Congresswoman, slammed his message, especially on Easter Sunday, saying the people needed to stop worshipping the president and intervene in Trump's madness. So what is the 25th Amendment? The constitutional provision came into existence after confusion following the death of President John F. Kennedy.
These aren't tweets or press releases. These are formal legislative documents being preserved in the National Archives forever. The media is treating it like a footnote. It isn't. Now, I need to be completely honest with you about something before we go any further. The most viral, dramatic version of this story that you see circulating on social media, the one with the flashing red countdown clocks and the ultimatums measured in specific hours, that framing is dramatically overstated. There is no binding constitutional countdown clock ticking towards zero.
The US Congress approved the 25th Amendment in 1965 and it got ratified in 1967. The amendment created a legal mechanism for designating a head of state when the president is disabled or dead. It formalizes the practice for the vice president to permanently take over, and it has never been used to permanently remove a sitting president, but has been voluntarily used by presidents to hand over temporary power to their seconds in command. George W. Bush and Ronald Reagan, they have both used it to undergo medical procedures. And even once by Richard Nixon, where he was forced to resign in 1973. The vice president and a majority of the cabinet members can declare the president as unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, and if the president disputes this, then 2/3 of the US Congress can vote to put the vice president in charge. Now, with Trump nearing 80, rumors about Trump's health and a visit to Walter Reed Hospital emerged on social media over the weekend, raising speculations around invoking 25th Amendment. Both Trump and former President Joe Biden have faced scrutiny over their physical and cognitive fitness due to age.
There is no official congressional ultimatum with a specific hourly deadline attached to it. The American Constitution does not work like a Netflix thriller. It moves slowly, deliberately, and through complex procedural mechanisms that cannot be reduced to a ticking clock. Anyone telling you otherwise is selling you drama instead of reality. But here is the crucial thing I need you to understand, and this is why you need to stay with me for this entire video. The fact that the most extreme viral version of this story is exaggerated does not mean the underlying story is fake or unimportant. It means the exact opposite. It means the real story, the verified, documented, factual story of what is actually happening in Congress right now regarding Trump's removal is so significant and so explosive that people feel the need to dramatize it even further just to get attention. And the real story, when you actually look at it carefully and honestly without the social media filter, is genuinely alarming on its own terms, without any added dramatization whatsoever. Representative Al Green of Texas and a block of allied House Democrats announced fresh articles of impeachment in November. Those articles accused Trump of flagrant violations of due process and constitutional duties. They specifically cited his pattern of disregarding direct orders from federal courts and his systematic campaign to erode judicial independence. These are not background noise statements that get issued and forgotten. These are formal legislative documents introduced on the floor of the House of Representatives by elected members of Congress who have sworn an oath to defend the Constitution. And they are part of a larger pattern of impeachment resolutions that have been building throughout this second term like a slow-moving wave that is gathering force. There have been resolutions citing war powers, abuse connected to unauthorized military strikes. There have been resolutions citing obstruction of investigations and the systematic stonewalling of congressional oversight. There have been resolutions citing the use of inflammatory rhetoric and social media posts as incitement and as a threat to the peaceful transfer of power. The articles keep coming. The number of co-signers keeps growing, and the formal congressional record of members going on record to say this president must be removed keeps getting longer and more substantial with each passing week. And then there is the Signal chat story, because that one deserves its own separate conversation, and it connects directly to why the resignation and removal calls are intensifying right now. Senior members of the Trump administration, people at the highest levels of national security decision-making who are entrusted with the most sensitive secrets the United States government possesses, were caught using an unclassified commercial messaging application to discuss military strike plans against Houthi targets in Yemen. We are not talking about scheduling meetings or coordinating press statements. We are talking about classified operational details, strike timing, targeting information being discussed on Signal, a platform that any first-year intelligence analyst knows is not authorized for such communications. And Democrats in Congress went absolutely ballistic over it. Calls for resignation started immediately, within hours of the story breaking. The argument being made was straightforward and devastatingly hard to dismiss. If any lower-level government official, any mid-level Pentagon staffer, any State Department analyst had done something like this with classified military information, they would be facing criminal charges before the end of the week. Their career would be over. They might be looking at prison time. But because it was Trump's inner circle doing it, the administration tried to wave it away and minimize it and pretend it was no big deal. And when Democrats demanded accountability, the administration and its allies cried deep state and political persecution. Yeah, right. Using a commercial app to discuss classified strike plans, and then crying deep state when Congress asked basic questions about operational security. Can you believe this? This is wild. This is genuinely one of the most alarming national security lapses in modern memory. So when you add it all up, the formal impeachment resolution sitting in the House Clerk's office, the more than 200 members on record calling for removal through various mechanisms, the war powers violations connected to military action, the open defiance of court orders from federal judges, the national security breaches like the Signal situation that would have ended any other political career. What you have is a picture of a congressional opposition that has completely stopped treating this presidency as normal or legitimate. They are treating it as an ongoing constitutional emergency that requires the most serious available legislative responses. That is a significant political and institutional development, regardless of whether any of the removal efforts are likely to succeed in the current congressional arithmetic. The fact that it is happening at this scale and this intensity matters enormously. And understanding why it matters requires getting into the details of what is actually driving this unprecedented push for removal. Okay, so let us really get into the substance of what is going on here, because there are several distinct threads running through this story, and they are all important for understanding the full picture. The impeachment push itself, the war powers allegations, the court defiance issue, the signal scandal, the viral media amplification of all of it, and the question of what any of this actually accomplishes politically given the current balance of power in Congress. Let us work through all of it piece by piece. Start with the impeachment resolutions themselves, because they are the core documented factual foundation of this entire story. Representative Al Green has been one of the most persistent and unrelenting voices for impeachment in the House Democratic caucus. He introduced impeachment articles during Trump's first term multiple times, and he has continued that pattern in this second term with even greater urgency, announcing fresh articles with a specific and detailed list of charges that read like a prosecutorial indictment. The flagrant violations of due process charge is connected directly to the court-ordered defiance pattern we have been covering extensively. When a federal judge issues a restraining order and the Trump administration apparently struggles to follow it, as happened in the Chicago National Guard case where the judge had to haul administration lawyers back into court and demand answers about whether her order was being obeyed, that is exactly the kind of executive behavior that Green and his allies are citing in their impeachment articles. The connection between what is happening in individual court cases and the formal congressional impeachment process is direct and explicit. The lawmakers filing these articles are watching the same court proceedings we have been covering and citing them as evidence of the impeachable conduct they are alleging. It is a seamless connection between the judicial branch's response and the legislative branch's response. The war powers angle is equally serious and arguably even more explosive in its constitutional implications. Among the impeachment articles that have been introduced is one centered on unauthorized military action against Iran. The Constitution is very clear on the question of war powers. There is no ambiguity. Congress has the power to declare war. The president is commander-in-chief, but does not have unilateral authority to take the country into armed conflict without congressional authorization. The War Powers Resolution passed in 1973 requires the president to notify Congress within 48 hours of committing military forces to hostilities and limits unauthorized military action to 60 days without congressional approval. And the allegation in the impeachment articles is that military strikes connected to Iran were carried out without proper congressional authorization and without adequate notification to Congress as required by law. That is not a minor procedural complaint that can be dismissed as technical. That is an allegation that the president violated both the Constitution itself and a major federal statute in the conduct of military operations. If those allegations are accurate and documented, they represent exactly the kind of high crimes and misdemeanors that the impeachment process was designed to address. And the Democrats who have signed on to these articles are arguing that they are accurate and documented. Now let us talk about the signal situation specifically, because it adds a genuinely alarming national security dimension to all of this that goes beyond the usual political back and forth. Here is what happened in plain terms. Senior officials in the Trump administration, people who are supposed to be the most careful and security-conscious individuals in the entire federal government because they are dealing with the most sensitive national security information in the world, were using Signal, a commercial encrypted messaging application that is absolutely not approved for classified communications, to discuss military strike plans against Houthi targets in Yemen. Not just general policy discussion, not just talking points, but operational details. The kind of information that if it got into the wrong hands, could directly endanger American military personnel and compromise ongoing operations. And Democrats in Congress responded immediately and forcefully with calls for resignations. The argument was crystal clear and logically airtight. The standards that apply to everyone else in the national security apparatus, the strict protocols around handling classified information, the serious criminal consequences for mishandling it, those standards apparently did not apply to Trump's inner circle. And when Congress started asking hard questions about it, the administration's response was to attack the questioners rather than address the substance of what had happened. Like, come on, are you kidding me? Classified military strike information on a commercial app, and the response to congressional oversight is to cry witch hunt. This is genuinely wild and would have been a career-ending scandal in any other administration. And then there is the 25th Amendment conversation, which keeps coming up alongside the impeachment talk and is worth understanding clearly. The 25th Amendment to the Constitution provides a mechanism for removing a president who is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office. Section 4 of that amendment allows the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to declare the president unable to serve, which would transfer power to the vice president. More than 200 members of Congress have gone on record calling for Trump's removal, with some of those calls specifically citing the 25th Amendment as a preferred mechanism. Practically speaking, the 25th Amendment route faces enormous political obstacles because it requires the cooperation of the vice president and the cabinet, which are both filled with Trump loyalists who are not going to turn against him. But the fact that over 200 elected federal legislators are on record calling for it tells you something very important about the state of institutional confidence in this presidency. When that many people who have taken an oath to the Constitution look at a sitting president and say publicly and formally that they believe he is unfit to continue serving, that is a significant institutional signal, regardless of whether the specific mechanism they are citing is realistically available to them. Now, here is the part of this story that requires some real honest analysis, because the question you are probably asking, and it is the right question, is what does any of this actually accomplish? Democrats do not control the House. They do not control the Senate. They cannot pass articles of impeachment through the full House without Republican votes. And they are absolutely not getting Republican votes for impeachment right now. The handful of Republicans who might privately have concerns about Trump's conduct are not going to walk into a vote to impeach him and end their political careers in the current environment. So why are Democrats filing these resolutions? Why are over 200 of them going on record for something that cannot pass? What is the strategic logic here if the immediate outcome is predetermined? The answer is several things at once. First, it is about the historical record. Every impeachment article that gets introduced and every member who signs onto it becomes part of the permanent public record of how Congress responded to this presidency. Future historians will study these documents. Second, it is about political pressure. Every resolution that gets filed forces Republicans to either defend Trump's specific alleged conduct or try to avoid commenting on it. Neither of those positions is entirely comfortable. Third, it is about public opinion. Keeping the specific allegations, court defiance, war powers violations, national security breaches in the headlines through formal legislative action gives the opposition a platform and a news hook that raw political speech does not provide. And fourth, it is about signaling to voters heading into the midterm elections exactly what Democrats believe is at stake and what they will do with power if they get it back. And the viral media amplification of all of this is its own fascinating phenomenon worth examining. There is an enormous appetite online for content about Trump being cornered, confronted, facing removal, being forced to resign, being dragged to accountability, and that appetite produces a content ecosystem where real but procedurally complex stories about impeachment resolutions and congressional removal calls get translated into dramatic, urgent thumbnails about countdowns and ultimatums and imminent removals. The viral version loses the nuance but captures the emotional reality of what is happening, which is that an unprecedented number of elected officials in the United States Congress genuinely believe this president represents a constitutional emergency and are saying so formally and on the record. The drama is real, even if the specific countdown clock framing is exaggerated. Understanding the difference between the real drama and the exaggerated drama is essential for actually following what is happening. All right, let us get into the clear takeaways here, because there are several things going on in this story that have real consequences for how the next period of American politics unfolds. So let us break it down directly. The formal congressional record of removal calls and impeachment resolutions is a genuinely significant political development that deserves serious attention beyond the viral dramatization. More than 200 members of Congress on record calling for a president's removal is not a small or dismissible thing. It represents a level of institutional opposition to a sitting president that is historically notable. The formal legislative documents, the actual introduced articles of impeachment with their specific charges, and their list of co-signers are going to be part of the permanent historical record of this presidency. Future historians, future legal scholars, future political scientists studying this period are going to look at those documents and use them to understand how American democratic institutions responded to the conduct of this administration. The fact that the removal efforts are unlikely to succeed, given current congressional arithmetic, does not diminish the significance of the fact that they are happening at this scale and with this level of documented specificity. The specific charges in the impeachment resolutions, particularly the court defiance charges and the war powers charges, connect directly to the broader pattern of judicial and constitutional conflict we have been covering. When Representative Green and his allies cite flagrant violations of due process and disregard for court orders in their impeachment articles, they are pointing to the same documented pattern of executive behavior that produced restraining orders and emergency appeal denials. The congressional impeachment process and the judicial enforcement process are running on parallel tracks, and they are responding to the same underlying set of executive actions. That parallel accountability pressure from two separate constitutional branches simultaneously represents something important about how the system is responding to this presidency. The courts are saying no through restraining orders and denied appeals. Congress is saying no through impeachment resolutions and removal calls. The two branches are independently and simultaneously pushing back against the same pattern of executive overreach. The signal situation and the war powers allegations represent the most immediately politically dangerous territory for the Trump administration because they involve national security, which is traditionally the area where presidential accountability expectations are highest and most bipartisan. Mishandling of classified military information and unauthorized military action are not the kinds of allegations that can be easily dismissed as partisan politics by anyone paying serious attention. They are the kinds of allegations that historically have the most potential to peel away support from unexpected quarters because they implicate the safety of American military personnel and the integrity of national security decision-making. The Democrats pushing these specific charges in their resignation demands and impeachment articles are not choosing them randomly. They are choosing the allegations that have the most potential to cut through partisan defenses and land with audiences beyond the committed opposition base. Whether they succeed in doing that remains to be seen, but the strategic logic of leading with national security allegations rather than purely political ones is sound and deliberate. The Republican response to all of these removal calls, which has been essentially silence or deflection rather than substantive engagement with the specific charges, tells you something important about where the GOP is heading. Congressional Republicans are in an extraordinarily difficult position right now. They cannot defend Trump's conduct on the specific allegations being cited in the impeachment articles, the court defiance, the signal situation, the war powers questions, without putting themselves on record defending things that are genuinely difficult to defend on the merits. But they also cannot distance themselves from Trump without facing the political consequences of his wrath and his base's wrath. So the default response has been to not engage substantively at all, to dismiss the whole thing as political theater, to attack the motivations of the people raising the concerns without addressing the substance of the concerns themselves. And that strategy of avoidance might work in the short term. But every time a new impeachment article gets introduced, and every time the specific charges get back in the headlines, Republican members have to navigate that impossible position all over again. And heading into the election season, that navigation is going to get progressively harder and more uncomfortable. So where does all of this actually go? Here is the honest assessment. The impeachment resolutions are not going to remove Trump from office in the current Congress. The arithmetic simply is not there. Republicans hold the House, and they are not going to vote to impeach a Republican president regardless of what the specific charges say. The 25th Amendment route is equally blocked by the political reality of a cabinet full of loyalists. So Trump is not going anywhere through these congressional mechanisms in the near term. But that is not actually the point of what Democrats are doing. The point is the record. The point is the pressure. The point is the headlines. The point is the constant reinforcement of a narrative about a presidency in constitutional crisis analysis with specific documented allegations attached to it. Every new impeachment article is a press release. Every new co-signer is a political statement. Every floor speech about court defiance and war powers violations is a preview of what Democrats plan to run on when the next election arrives. Here is the bottom line on all of this. Trump is not being removed from office by Congress this week or this month. That is the honest truth, and anyone telling you otherwise is selling you a fictional countdown clock. But what is really happening is almost as significant in its own way. An unprecedented number of elected federal legislators are formally and on the record treating this presidency as a constitutional emergency. They are citing specific documented conduct, court defiance, war powers violations, national security breaches as grounds for removal. They are building a permanent record that is going to shape how this administration is understood historically and how the next elections get framed politically. And every week that brings a new court loss, a new restraining order, a new denied appeal, a new national security controversy adds more fuel to that fire. Trump is not cornered by a countdown clock, but he is cornered by a documented record of conduct that his opponents are going to spend the next 2 years turning into the central argument for why his party should lose Congress. And that kind of cornered, the slow, methodical, political kind, tends to matter a lot more in the long run than any single dramatic moment ever could. Stay tuned, because the midterm battlefield is being built right now, and the foundation it is being built on is this record of what this administration has actually done.